I'm Matt Landau from vrmb.com, and this is Unlocked, Season 6, Magic Zones. I get a little bit teary-eyed when I say that phrase because this is the last time I'll ever be saying it. About 2 weeks ago, we published our last episode of Season 6, and I thought it would be cool to reflect back on the season with some of my biggest takeaways. I'd like to start with a question. How do you run your vacation rental business? Some people are focused on the money, whereas others do it for separate but equally important reasons. While focusing solely on money may be a conventional purpose of small business, our hosts who focus on other metrics seem to be happier and they seem to last longer in our newly emerging space. It was about 16 weeks ago now that we set out to explore the various ways in which professionals in our industry define and achieve success. And we proposed at the beginning of the season that a magic zone, or a sweet spot, could be the common denominator in that discussion across all different destinations. But we didn't know how or why. Each week, we shared interviews with some of the wisest, freshest, most dynamic leaders that our industry has to offer. And some of them you may have recognized. Others are likely completely new to your radar. But they all had an entirely different origin story. And they all had completely different business types, which is maybe the most beautiful thing about the vacation rental industry as a whole, the variety of our stakeholders. In each interview this season, you'll hear me pause the live conversation, sometimes twice, to call out some salient point that directly contributes to that individual's magic zone, their sweet spot of success. And over the course of 15 interviews, I began to draw some connections between those nuggets of wisdom. These patterns that began to emerge almost serve like a compass for the rest of us to use as we navigate our own small business journey. And by the final episode, the theory was so beautifully validated that I literally couldn't wait to share it all with you. So here is that conclusion. The happiest, most fulfilled, most sustainable vacation rental owners and managers across all locations and business types and maturity levels, well, at least the 15 that we interviewed this season, they were not seeking unlimited growth. Wait, what? You might be saying? That's right. These businesses were not following conventional business advice to maximize the returns at all cost. There was indeed an understanding of money, but in addition to that, they'd each handcrafted for themselves a more layered definition of success. And most excitingly, these definitions are not impossible to achieve. In fact, these sweet spots or magic zones seem surprisingly attainable, no matter the size or shape of your business, something feasible that might work for all. And I'm reminded of the beauty of taking on a physical challenge like a half marathon, something that's certainly not a piece of cake for most of us. We definitely need to train for it, but it's also not an ultra marathon up in the mountains, not so extreme that we may never ever reach the finish line. It's more like a sweet spot, slightly out of grasp, but also within reach with some focus. My guess is that the choice away from growth for growth's sake is probably because chasing growth enters the independent vacation rental owner or manager into a rat race with a bigger, richer set of competitors who can likely obliterate each other when they're executing the same model. But when different terms are set, it led the individuals that we featured this season down a different path, equally fulfilling, but different. And this happiness seems to be what keeps these people going. It seems to be the fire to the passion keeping our industry alive. But this all raises the question, can any vacation rental owner or manager find and reach a magic zone? Can we learn to find success in the industry by signing up not for the ultra endurance marathon up in the mountains, but the half marathon that with some training we can achieve and enjoy? My answer is possibly, but it does take some work. So using some of my favorite sound bites from this season, I've categorized the ways you too can make a shift towards your magic zone or sweet spot. This is a way to veer off the beaten small business path and blaze your own vacation rental trail. Four ways to configure your magic zone. Let's start off with number one, practical criteria. Rather than focusing just on the most, approach your business decisions with a list of practical criteria. Is this an activity that you really enjoy? Is this a person you want to work with? Is this the guest that you'd like to have coffee with? Is this property driving you and your team absolutely mad? In episode 93, Bob Gardner of Casal de Fiqui gives us a brilliant example of measuring his success using practical criteria.
For me, that good loop is trying to do the right thing, whatever the right thing is in your community or whatever you feel passionate about. And that will come and pay dividends, that people will acknowledge that. Your guests will acknowledge it, your peers will acknowledge it, your community will acknowledge it. Whatever the topic, it doesn't matter from this point of view. It's about putting yourself in that situation and saying, what can I do this week or this month that is going to be supportive of my community? And thinking about, public good, just not your own private good, and thinking how you can represent your community. And I think if you're doing it right, you're seen as, maybe it isn't too grandiose to say, you're seen as somewhat as a responsible business leader. You've got some respect in the community, and you've done that over time. It's not something that happens overnight. You can't just switch it on. You've got to build at it, and you've got to work at it over years. And I'm not saying I'm perfect. I'm certainly not, but it's certainly something that's been core to what we've done from day one, and I can't imagine not doing it, really.
Another take on practical criteria is Kyle Finley of Brief Homes and Legal B&B, who talked about removing the things that stressed him out in episode 87.
Like I was making more money than I've ever made in my entire life, but I was also I was the least happy I ever was in my entire life at the same exact time. And the reason being is because I was working so much on the company and servicing others. I was not working on me at all, like zero. Okay, like going to the gym, cool. Reading a couple books, cool. But working on me, meaning learning who I am as a person, developing as a person, refining my goals, my visions, that inner dialogue with myself, that had like zero growth, right? So having the time to work on me as a person is now a priority, right? And also to keep my stress low and not compromise myself just to make more bucks.
Some people choose time off. Others choose meeting guests. Some choose profit. Some choose removing stress. Create a list of practical criteria as opposed to solely looking at your bottom line as a means to defining your goals. When you do this exercise with your partner or your team member or a fellow vacation rental professional, you may very well realize you're already on your way to finding your magic zone. Number 2, immerse yourself in your niche. We talk a lot about niches here at VRMB, and it's because choosing a specialty that you do better than the majority of your competition, it's like a growth hack to achieving your booking goals. And more importantly, the right kinds of bookings. Guests who appreciate and respect you as a host. Finding and immersing yourself in your niche stacks the odds in your favor. And a great way to find it is to look inwards. Our first example from the season is Sharon Skurlock from episode 88. She runs Skurlock Farms, which is a farm-friendly vacation rental business, and I'd like you to listen to how her choice of niche listing sites has impacted her bookings.
Well, one of your posts on the Inner Circle newsletter one week was a way to get extra income was to find niche posts. So I thought, well, let's see, I'm a farm. So I looked up farm stays. Well, there's a website, Farm Stay USA. So I signed up with them.
Like a listing site almost.
A listing site. Scotty Jones began it, and she does a super job with it. Over half now of all of my rentals come via that website. They find me there, and then they go to my website and book direct. But they're actually looking for a farm stay. You know, the kids want to gather eggs. They want to interact with animals. The farm experience.
Another simple yet so extremely powerful example of immersing yourself in your niche comes to us from episode 97 with Anthony Gant of At Ease, in which his own needs not being met led to him creating his own niche himself.
So the pain was we were staying in a hotel in Virginia, and we had to put 2 chairs together for my 6-year-old, 7-year-old to sleep on, and that was the extended stay. And we were supposed to stay there for 10 days, and we said, screw this, let's stay here for 2 days, check out early, go to your mother's house in New York. So we drove up the road and stayed there for a few days. And we said, when we moved to Texas, there's no way that we're staying in a hotel.
And your kids probably like, no more 2 chairs, please.
No more 2 chairs. And that's where we got into, like, this is a pain point for military families, not as large as mine, but just families in general who are relocating every so often. You know, it's not fun to be in a hotel for anything beyond 3 or 4 days, especially if you're not on a vacation or if you're with kids. But the real pain point, Matt, that came on to us was when I turned in my travel voucher to find out that it was not allowed and that I had broken a rule.
That idea from Anthony for me says it all. If you can identify an area in which your needs as a traveler are not being met and you can validate it with other people like you, you've found a magic zone in which you are the subject matter expert. I'm not suggesting you're the world's leading expert. I'm just saying that you know more about that niche than most people. Immersing yourself in that niche, like Sharon and Anthony, that's a great way to find your sweet spot or magic zone. Number 3, define what is enough. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness. Chances are, in the wake of the pandemic, you're experiencing the best of times right now, and you likely will for another year, maybe 2, maybe 3. But with such fortuitous tailwinds, now serves as a fantastic time to make some important choices about your future. And instead of trying to maximize everything and grow exponentially, there's an immense power in sitting down and deciding what is enough, what's sufficient for us. This is typically a quantity discussion, like how much revenue or profit is enough, what amount of properties of a particular style are enough for us, how much growth is enough. The secret here is that when you reach that enough, you stop. Being disciplined requires some work, but seems to lead to sustainable profits and happiness, according to this season's guests. One example defining what's enough was from HomeAway co-founder Carl Shepard in episode 91.
We have to define the level of opportunity, okay? I think that if you're trying to build $1 billion business, you know, a unicorn that you're going to take public, I think the berths there are all fully occupied. Are there individual entrepreneurs who could build very profitable lifestyle businesses that they can pass to their children, much like property managers passed from the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s? You know, they just passed it down to their children. I think that you could run, for example, a special needs website, because there are a number of us. I have a child with Down syndrome, and there are a number of us who would love to find that website. Especially if you have a kid with autism, you really want to find the right website that understands what you need to see in a listing before you can risk taking your child there. So yes, that's a niche. I think there are niches about value. There are going to be niches about places. That these are the 50,000 best beach homes in the world. There's a business model. Get selected. Be editorially selected. I just don't see those as billion-dollar market cap companies. I see them as profitable businesses.
Carl's point about the viability of small business led beautifully into the next episode of the season, episode 92, featuring Sybil Kim, who defined what's enough for her with an upper boundary on the service level that she could afford to offer her guests.
If we start doing more travel in our lives, it needs to be sustained and managed. I'm basically the property manager right now. I'm doing everything. And, this is maybe a lesson also out there. Like, nobody does it as well as you do. And that's one of the hardest things, I think, as an owner to admit to yourself, to let go and figure out a plan of how can I maintain this at this level without losing quality of what I'm providing.
I love these two episodes back to back. They show the range, the breadth of vacation rental genius. And part of using your magic zone is designating what's enough and being happy when you reach it. And it's perfectly fine, by the way, to reassess your sweet spot or what's enough at the end of every quarter or even year. But there is something beautiful about not having to constantly reach for more. There's something just inherently fun about choosing a race that's within reach, but does require some legitimate effort to achieve. There is joy in that process. Our fourth category is understand, then delegate. Us vacation rental managers are notorious for being control freaks. We want to do everything ourselves because we know that we can do it best. And this is a strength until it becomes a weakness, because time in our industry is our most precious resource. Our bandwidth as entrepreneurs, it's limited in a gazillion ways. So instead of trying to do all the things yourself, we found that you can get to your magic zone by first understanding how to do whatever it is really well, and then creating a process so that others can do it for you should that be necessary. Our first example comes from Eddie Gray of Newman Daily Resort Properties, in episode 99, in which he goes to a problem or a property when any kind of issue is reported in order to understand it in its entirety.
I like to, and my department likes to go to every single complaint, because some of those complaints happen where it's vague, where someone will call and say, the house is dirty. And you're like, what's dirty? They don't give enough details to the reservation department. So we would have to go out there and figure out what's the problem, because the worst thing as a housekeeper manager, you don't want all these complaints under your umbrella. So that was one reason I started tracking the complaint.
Once you truly understand a problem or how something should be done properly, delegating it can be incredibly powerful. It's the big unlock mechanism of vacation rental growth. In episode 105, Sherry Woodhouse and Daryl Looney helped me see the upside of standard operating procedures.
Staffing is one of the most difficult aspects of running the villa. And so sometimes you have staff turnover. And one of the things that we've learned is you really need to make sure that staff is cross-trained, not only properly trained, but cross-trained. That way you're never dependent on any one individual. The villa needs to be able to function regardless of who is there. So having protocols in place, we have a lot of protocols in place, but I'm even, going into much more detail right now because I want nothing left to chance. People should know, how do we welcome the guests? How do we make our beds? How do we clean our bathrooms? There's a process, there's a protocol. One guest room should not be done a certain way and another one be done a different way. No, There's a standard. There's a May we standard.
By understanding a problem like Eddie and then procedurizing it like Sherry and Daryl do, you choose when to choose. This makes your time way more efficient, and frankly, it makes it a whole lot more enjoyable as well. That is a way, by understanding the problem, then delegating, you can reach your magic zone, however you define that to be. To summarize, our 4 categories of ways in which you can configure your magic zone. Number 1, practical criteria. Number 2, immersing yourself in your niche. Number 3, defining what's enough. And number 4, understand, then delegate. These categories seem to sit within the capacity of any vacation rental professional, in my opinion. They're about figuring out how to use your vacation rentals to achieve a life that you desire, whatever that looks like. And this is as opposed to becoming stressed out or burdened by this entrepreneurial path and the business that we are taught in school. So I'd go as far as to argue that if you can define and reach your sweet spot or magic zone using vacation rentals, you are pioneering in an entirely new generation of hospitality. We are actually redefining entrepreneurship as we know it. I hope you enjoyed this summary of Season 6 of the Unlocked podcast, Magic Zones. It was a blast to put together, and I cannot thank our esteemed guests enough. I'd like to give a shout out to Stuart Hooper and Tammy Rowe of Mango Fish Studios, who, when you normally hear the end of a podcast, there's like a gazillion names of people who contributed to the outcome. And in my case, it's 2. They do all the brilliant work. I'd also like to thank all of our listeners. It's hard to quantify whether our podcast initiative is working or not, whether people are actually listening to it. But when we get emails from people who enjoyed a particular episode or who took a specific tip and ran with it, or when we see reviews on Apple Podcasts, we know that we are on the right track. We always felt it, but seeing that validation makes it much more enjoyable. Oh, and if you found yourself enjoying any episodes this season, maybe pulling over to the side of the road to jot down some kind of aha moment, or implementing something that you heard in an interview in order to achieve a positive result, consider paying back some of the love and joining VRMB Communities as an esteemed Inner Circle member. We have nearly 1,000 of the world's most thoughtful and creative vacation rental professionals all under one virtual roof. One part of our community is structured learning materials, workbooks, workshops, ebooks, video courses. The other part is an ongoing discussion with 5,000 threads actively addressing some of the most pressing challenges in the vacation rental business today. You can join by heading over to community.vrmb.com/register. You can cancel at any time, but we oftentimes find that upon joining, people realize the power of collective wisdom in their business. If we can help you solve your steepest challenges, we've done our job. That's community.vrmb.com/register. Look forward to seeing you in there. That's it from me. Keep an eye out for Season 7 of the Unlocked podcast coming soon. And until then, enjoy finding your magic zone.